Good evening. Welcome to the December 8th meeting of the Infrastructure Oversight Board of the City of Burbank. Our first order is a flag salute. Mr. Brennan will lead us in it. All right. I guess next is roll call. Would someone please call the roll? All right.
Armin Avazian,
Present.
Walter Brennan Jr.,
Present.
Maria Coronado,
Present.
Greg Jackson,
Present.
Vanessa Rashal,
Present.
Tamala Takahashi,
Present.
Jeff Vandervoort.
All right, we have everyone in attendance this evening. It's great to see everyone. Item C is announcements. Do we have any announcements? I have one. I'd like to congratulate our colleague, and I think we all do, Ms. Takahashi, on her election to the City Council.
Thank you.
We wish you well, and we will miss you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements? No? No one? All right, item D is public comments, and I saw there was a card, so
Yes, we have.
whomever it is, please announce.
Yes, we have one. David Donahue.
All right, the floor is you, Mr. Donahue.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the Infrastructure Oversight Board. I was here the last meeting, and I want to be able to again address on behalf of the Vision Burbank Board of Directors. I am currently the elected Vice President, and we are opposed to the Metro's plan of taking away 2 lanes from Olive Avenue. I think that the letter that the City Council issued to Metro is, I think, the great start. Get your numbers up, and then you used mixed flow until you get your numbers up, and then let's readdress taking away the 2 full lanes of Olive Avenue between Buena Vista and First, I believe it is. So this happens to be your future items, item B, and Vision Burbank is looking forward to supporting the city in that matter. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. We were supposed to hear that item this evening, but for some reason, unbeknownst to me at least, it was put off to a future date. Do we have any comments we'd like to comment on this? Mr. Berkman, maybe you could give us some idea where we're not going on this.
Yes, Honorable Chair and board members, Mr. Krisky, our Assistant Director of Community Development over Transportation, told us that there's more research and time needed to bring the item to the board, but it will be forthcoming, and we'll keep you posted on the date. I don't know if you had anything else to add. Mr. Hahn?
So they haven't had a follow-up meeting with Metro yet, so once they have the meeting with Metro and once they have more information, they'll bring that information to the board.
All right, so thank you very much. All right, we're now to item F, approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments, additions, corrections, revisions? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve. Come on, gang.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and it's 2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Abstentions?
I wasn't here.
Okay, and 2 abstentions. Okay. We're now on to reports to the board. Item G, the unfunded project list. Is someone going to make a presentation? Thank you very much.
We will, sir. Mr. Chair and board members, we're pleased to bring this item to you. As a an overview, you see that staff is recommending that the board receive and discuss the citywide infrastructure unfunded needs list for consideration in the fiscal year 23-24 budget. This list was created in 2013 to show the infrastructure projects needed to maintain, update, and replace the city's infrastructure in support of the proposition that created Measure P. Each year during the budget process, the list is reevaluated by each department to determine if existing projects should be removed or have their scopes or budgets modified, and also if new projects should be added. So, I wanted to emphasize this agenda item builds upon our previous improvements to the capital improvement project program. After that COVID year when I first started, after that we created a prioritization methodology, and we produced 2 prioritized CIP programs based on that methodology. So that was very good work by the board with us. Last year, during the process, the board asked us to be able to review the unfunded needs list, and we went through a high-level prioritization exercise, and that's what produced the list that is before us tonight. And tonight, we take another step with the goal of continuous improvement in mind. Staff always wants to do that with you, to review the list and provide input on which projects the board would like staff to consider carefully when preparing their department's proposed CIPs to be considered by the board and council coming forward for the upcoming fiscal year. So the unfunded needs list, this list is a very high-level document. It's a planning document, it's a living document, and it's modified on an as-needed basis, primarily during our CIP development process. It is not a document that staff prepared with thoroughly vetted scopes and budgets and schedule, as a high-level planning document. So consequently, really, to set context, tonight's not the opportunity to go through these projects one by one in detail. Rather, that opportunity comes in February and March with our meetings when the departments all bring forward their recommendations for proposed projects as part of the program ultimately before you give your recommendation to council. So I wanted to make sure we had that, because I know I look at it and there is a lot to take in, and we can really get lost, running around in that maze of so many different things. So my goal with Mr. Hahn is to make sure we can properly convey to the departments what this board feels, those number ones, I guess what I would say is what's the top number ones that they really, we really should consider making sure this is in your eyes when you're preparing your individual capital programs. So I appreciate the opportunity to make that introduction, and we look forward to having this discussion. Mr. Hahn, I don't know if you wanted to set have any questions or guides for the board as well, but if not, we'll just get right into it.
Yeah, the only comment I have is that we're in the process of developing our CIP budget right now. So I think this is a good time to introduce this to the board and have a discussion, and we could take this to the departments and they could start looking at it and seeing if that's something that they could actually deliver and also fund within the program that they have.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen, for that presentation. What I'd like to do this evening is, it's a short, well, it's not a short list, but it's an extensive list, but to go page by page, and we can say if there's an item which we really have great interest in, or if there's an item we have some questions on. So the first page of the unfunded needs is dealing with streets. Colleagues, do you have any questions or any projects you think should be given high priorities on this list?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's a general question. I know we have money coming from the federal government, from the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then the main infrastructure bill. I know rail and bridges and ports, and includes a lot of things. Just wondering, I know our city is all over applying for some of the grants. Just wondering how that might affect some of these projects, considering the metro, that's rail, right? So going forward, that might help fund our unfunded situation here. Just wanted to bring that out.
Yes, through the chair, Board Member Coronado, very astute, accurate point. We might remember that I believe there's a category within our prioritization list, which comes with fiscal points, I think. You know, funding supports the points of bringing a project forward. So that is one of the things that would really bring a project, let's say, from a medium priority to a high priority when we actively get funds. But the thing to recognize is that we as staff will likely bring, only apply for grants that we have high priority projects for. There are times where money is provided to us, based on population, let's say. So that is something that we consider. But to make sure grant applications and administration and processing, they take up a lot of time. So we want to make sure the project that we apply for, and if we're going to use grant money with reporting, strict reporting requirements, we have to make sure that project is something that we feel is a priority, so the effort is worth the money that we get. So appreciate the question.
And also, if I may add, all the grants that you're talking about, whenever federal funds or state funds, there's also a local match that the city would have to put local funds into the project. So it's never 100% grant from federal. So usually it's about 25% match. So if it's a $10 million project, we still have to come up with quite a bit of money to match and be able to move forward with the project.
Does anyone else have comments on the first page? I have, I'm sorry, Ms. Takahashi, did I see? Yes. Slight movement on your side.
I wasn't sure if Mr. Vanderbilt wanted to go first, but, okay. Yeah, I have a couple items that stood out to me. First is the Victory Chandler rail crossing removal project, that stretch. I don't know if the rail needs to be removed in order to that's the stretch to finish the bike path, right? Yeah. I don't know if the rail needs to be removed necessarily in order to create the bike path, but that connection there is incredibly important to our community, I believe, so that's high on my list personally. And then traffic mitigations in general are a big concern for the community, and as we increase our population and as we're bringing in more housing, that is, traffic in general is a concern, but also specifically traffic calming measures in areas where there's high speeding, like Glen Oaks and whatnot. So those are two that really stood out to me as important in the traffic area.
Thank you. Mr. Vandenborg?
Mr. Chair, may I address?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Ms.
yes, I don't
Takahashi's?
want to cut you off.
The one thing I wanted to let the board know and the public know that's listening, the Chandler Bikeway is an active project. And that is definitely moving forward through Mr. Kriski's transportation division in CDD and community development. And this is one of those high-level things that needs to happen in order for that bikeway project to be designed and constructed. So it's something that is considered, but it is something that we can make a note to discuss with transportation to see if it's still accurate or whether it should be removed and rolled up into that project itself.
Yes, so this project, it's a separate project outside of the existing Chandler project that the city's working on. So that's funded, and we're in the process of design or procuring a consultant to help us with the design process. So that's why the importance is at 3, because the primary objective is to make that trail connection, finish that out, and then this is I don't know the full detail scope of this, but it's outside the original scope of that trail project.
So this, to clarify, this would happen after the Chandler Bikeway project that's under development right now is pretty much done?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Ladies first. Ms.
Thank you.
Michelle.
It's a quick question. So there's one of the items is the MetroLink double track, and it's 6.6 million. It refers to 2 studies. Are the studies on Metro's website?
I'm not sure if the studies on Metro's website.
Are they available yet to the public just to review? There refers to studies?
I'm assuming it is because we're reviewing the plans. So Metro has submitted plans for the city to review. I believe we had one go-around at reviewing, and we submitted comments back to Metro. So it's in the design process right now.
Okay, so the studies are probably on Metro's website.
Yeah,
if we
so let me see if I
Google.
can find the link.
Okay.
I could forward that on to the board.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Vanderberg?
H before youth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Armin, you look good with the beer.
Okay, thank you.
Go for it.
Just going through this list, I see a lot of these projects are eligible for, let's say, Measure M and Measure R applications. I-5 unmet needs is a very good candidate for the next phase of Clean California grants, which is capped at $5 million. Are you going to apply for some of these funds for these projects, even though, let's say, if it's not a priority one, and they are pretty, I would say, nice cookie cutter projects for these grants?
Right. To address it in the same manner as Ms. Coronado's question, I think it was every project that we have that can be eligible for the Measure M's or the Measure P's or any other grant sources, that is our primary directive. We love using other people's money, so as opposed to general fund or even Measure P. So we definitely want to do that. We will, again, chat with Mr. Krisky and his team about the unmet needs for the I-5, because that is a project that is ongoing right now. It takes a long time, obviously. Remember how long the Burbank Bridge took, and those needs are all along and associated with that project, and there are active things going on as we close that out with Caltrans.
Correct. And also, as far as Measure M and Measure R, the local return funds, we are using that for Chandler and San Fernando Bike Trail. So we are taking every opportunity to access those funds.
Any more questions, Armin? No? But Mr. Vandenberg, you now have the floor.
Mr. Illustrious Chairman, congratulations on being the chair, by the way. Yes. Lucky for me. Mr. Chair, my colleagues have already asked the critical question, which is the issue of the Chandler Bike Path Extension, which is apparently not at all related to a prioritization number 3 for the Victory Chandler Rail Crossing. So that's very clear to me. I would like to express a concern that we move on the Olive and Magnolia Bridge Improvement Project. Staff has it as a number 1, so that means that it's up there in the bubbling to the surface or moving forward. And again, I imagine this is going to be a multi-year effort, but walking on that bridge regularly, at least once a week, maybe twice a week, on both of those bridges, I see how unsafe they are, and all it takes is somebody bumping you over, especially poor bikers that actually use the sidewalk to bike up and down those bridges, that we are desperately in need of improving that safety. Perhaps staff can sort of tell us how this has bubbled forward in the last year.
I'll allow Mr. Hahn to provide some good news.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. So we've recently released an RFP for the rail design and doing some rehab on the bridge deck. So we are expecting the proposals to come back by December 14th. And so this is just addressing the rail issue. As far as the bridge, the construction for the $24 million, that dollar was originally associated with the bridge expansion. So this is a different item. The reason it's still on here is because this is for bridge expansion or possibly a new construction. The rail project for the Olive and Mag, the rail rehab, I would say, that is we're moving forward, and hopefully we'll have the consultant on board by February.
Fantastic. And if you were to guess, and I know it's a guess, when would you imagine we'll finally see some rails put up that are taller than 36 inches?
Well, the design is funded, but we don't have construction dollars yet. So we're actively searching for the construction funds. So as far as design, once we get the consultant on board in February, when we start probably going to council in February, kickoff meeting probably in April-ish, and then we're looking at I would say anywhere from 10 to 12 months to get the design done.
It's a couple of years.
Couple-
Yeah. But appreciate the question, because this kind of example blends into everything we've been talking about. So there exists a current project sheet that we've looked at for the Olive and Magnolia Bridge railings. And that was a couple of years ago when the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act came out. We worked to try and get funds from that and other monies, but we were unsuccessful. It was, I believe, the total budget for both was 2.4 million. The match, for example, that we talk about going after that grant was 20%. So we had a $400,000 commitment that the board, that we all put forward to council to pursue this grant in anticipation of hopefully getting this going forward. So we have the design money with our current project, and we will seek, we will be coming back to you probably with requests for construction dollars. Given how much costs have increased just in the past couple of years, I'd imagine this project, once we get the cost estimate from the designer, we'll come back and say, all right, well, here's the reality. But the good thing is, when you have a design complete, it makes the application for a grant that much stronger. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to get that. Otherwise, we'll be coming to you with a prioritization probably to see if we want to use Measure P, or we'll talk to other folks about other funding sources. And lastly, we can revise this write-up because we are actually pursuing the railing, so we can modify that. I made a note of that. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, this is my last year here on the board, so I just want to remind my colleagues that for me, this is something, or not for me, but all the people who use the train and who walk up or forget the elevator, walk up the stairs, use that bridge all the time. And it really is a priority that we need to hopefully find dollars within Measure P funds. This would be a great opportunity. So if I'm not here, hopefully a little voice will remind you that someone here uses it and wanted your support for that. And then I echo what our newly elected council member mentioned about the issue of traffic mitigation. And that's a number one here. So I'll make a quick observation. I noticed that in big numbers, the streets total 87 million or so. Is the same 87 million as it has been in the past. The Park and Rec folks, on the other hand, have really upped their game and upped another 50 million or so into the pot, give or take. I don't know if that needs to be reminded of staff for the next presentation of this a year from now to make the numbers perhaps a little more realistic based on just all the inflation and increases in costs for purposes of the streets at least. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Van der Boer, thank you for that comment. That is one of the things that we ask of the department staff when Mr. Hahn and his team go to them to say, it's scopes, budgets, and schedules. So, I mean, not so much schedules, because these are the high-level needs, but we definitely want to have accurate numbers, so it's a good point. We will make sure to ask them that.
All right, so thank you. It's going to be my policy usually as chair to speak last. And one of the advantages that everything I wanted to say has already been said. So you don't have to hear me. But I would point out two items to me leaped out. One was the intersection traffic mitigation issues. And we're experiencing a lot of development, a lot of it brought forth by changes in state law, which, however, didn't consider the full picture, and there's unfunded mandates that come along with that. And street improvements, I think, are very important, that we need to be ahead of the curve or before it, we're gridlock. And the second is the Olive Magnolia Bridge, which, when I see words functionally obsolete and structurally deficient, that, causes me some concern. And I've noticed, driving to the bridges recently, several sections of the railing has been taken out. I assume that's been because of some type of auto accident that has occurred, and so there's temporary ballards and other things going on. But those are the two projects that spoke out to me.
I have a follow-up question, one of your comments. So you mentioned that with the new developments that are coming in, that it's an unfunded mandate from the state. And I'm wondering, part of the developments is diff fees or diff, is it's called DIF, right? Development impact fees, right? So do DIFs go into part of this process, or are they a separate funding for the improvements around the developments that would then affect like traffic mitigation and things like that around the developments? Or is that included in our process here too?
So our impact fees that our city and other cities collect, they are basically pooled and used as we need to within our program. They're kind of available to us. The DIFs themselves, I think, are under the purview of community development. I would have to, maybe during the capital improvement program meetings that we have, ask Mr. Krisky or his team to kind of elaborate on how they are and plan on using them going forward. I don't know right now.
Okay, because I'm wondering if that can be also part of how, I mean, even though it's unfunded mandate, how that could be applied to some of the issues that increase traffic and other impacts to the community around them, that it's not just on us as the infrastructure board to have to mitigate that, but also part of the development's responsibility too with their diffs, so.
So
Very good point.
as far as the development impact fee, so there's different impact fee. You have the library impact fee, parks impact fee. So whatever, when they pay for a parks impact fee, you can only use it for parks development. And if it's library impact fee, then you can only use it for library improvements. As far as transportation related, if there are impact fees associated with it, then it gets identified in the conditions of the approval, and then it should identify how much the developer is responsible to pay or build, and that should be outlined in the conditions.
Okay, well, we're moving into a new area, and we're going to have to, be on our toes. All right, turning now, I think, to page 2, which is storm drains and parks. Colleagues, do you have any projects out there that you think need special attention, or do you have questions? The floor is yours. Mr. Vandenberg.
May or may not be, thank you. Sorry, I'm talking about the Starlight Bowl placehold number of $75 million. I am extremely concerned that this has moved to a 2 priority, because in my opinion, it should lay somewhere in the 3, perhaps 4 or 5 priority, primarily for 2 reasons. Number one, it's not used enough, and I can guarantee you, neighbors, the chair included, would be up in arms and more than arms and legs and everything else, complaining if and the pitchforks if this was suddenly to become more used. And the obvious investment of $75 million means you would want to get your money back in terms of value to the community, and primarily that would be to increase use. So in my opinion, this is something that, yes, there may be a dozen projects that need to be done to improve handicap access, et cetera. I mean, we all go up there from time to time, and it's magnificent, it's beautiful, but I just don't see us as a community, I hope as a board, supporting the idea that this should be a number 2 priority. This should be a number 3 or 3.5.
Well spoken. Ms. Takaguchi, do you have? Oh, yes, please.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, going back to the storm drains, I know we're undergoing a drought right now. However, there are years, and this is going to be one of those years, and for those of you who never took a world geography class or geology class of anything, from time to time, when volcanoes go off in Indonesia or in the Philippines or in Siberia, Southern California experiences unusual rains. This is going to be one of those years. In Hawaii, there's constant volcano going up, the same thing in Indonesia. So, and just recently, we've experienced a little bit of rain that really wasn't anticipated. So I would like to see the storm drains improved. So maybe that should be, for this year anyway, moved up to number one just because every now and again, we get those unusual years. And this is gonna be one of those unusual years where every couple of weeks I can sit down, we're gonna get rain in 2 weeks, and sure enough, we do. So, it's gonna be heavy for just this year, not next year or the year after, we're gonna go back to drought, but this is just an unusual year, and I think we should be prepared for it. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I can, without getting too engineering-y and wonky about storm drains, because I do love flood design, there are long-term plans for 10-year and 25-year and 50-year and 100-year storms, which is basically a probability of a certain volume and/or intensity. And this project, I'm sure, was put on this list because the one thing that doesn't have any grants or anything associated with it, I mean, we have Measure W, which is more of a stormwater quality, but stormwater quantity, like our storm drains, it's going to be a general fund or a Measure P. So I'm pretty sure that's why that's on here. I can tell the board and the public, in my few years, granted, we're in the drought, but when we have had heavy rains, and in heavy rains, our crews are out there very quickly looking at, the canyons and sunset, making sure everything's clear. Our storm drain systems, which I think is about a third the county, I don't know which way it is, either a third the county or 2/3 the county and the rest city. They function really well. And our assistant director over wastewater and stormwater services, Mr. Steve Walker, they are always working with our field crews to make sure if there are any issues that we see out there, that we do plan for those. And they would come to this body as an individual project in an area. So I don't see any wood, but I'm hoping we're okay, but appreciate the thoughts because we want to be ready for the storm drains and the probability that they're going to come to make sure we're investing properly. So thank you for bringing that up.
May I ask one question on that follow-up? For water quality purposes, I believe we've installed mesh grates. in front-
Screening, yes.
Screens,
Yes,
thank
yes.
you. And those get clogged, from my observation, pine needles and other refuse. Do we actively look to clean those out when we know a rainstorm is coming our way?
Yes, sir. Our field crews, when I talk about the field crews, our public works crews in streets, and as we need, if we need resources, wastewater crews, they always go out before major storms are forecasted, making sure all the inlets are cleared and all the drains are ready. We do that citywide in August and September to make sure everything is clear. But as fall comes and leaves drop, they go through, make sure everything is cleared out to the best that we can when heavy rains are expected.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Takaguchi.
A follow-up question for that. I think with the new 311 app, that if there is a drain that is clogged or there's a water issue, that can be reported, right? I believe so.
I think it would be, we do have an other category. I don't think it's in our drop-down menu, but definitely we have an other, and thank you for bringing it up. It has a capability to take a picture and show us exactly where it is, so thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, yeah. I think it takes the most a day or two for them to come out, maybe even within the same day. I've done a report once where they came out the same day, so it's a very quick turnaround.
I appreciate you bringing that up because they're an amazing team. Folks report potholes and sidewalks, and they are out there almost always the same day to take care of them.
Yeah, for sure. And then another follow-up question, if you don't mind. So it's mentioned here that part of this process is to prevent sinkholes. And in my 23 years that I've lived in Burbank, I don't think I've ever seen a sinkhole, but of course it's right here. But it's a concern. So I'm wondering, is there a way that you can maybe predict or have a sense of where there would be more likely a sinkhole and be able to address it ahead of time, or is it just generally keeping everything in good shape?
I would answer that by saying our crews are very on top of all of our infrastructure, and from above ground, our street crews are out there looking at all the streets in their daily process of going around their business. And sinkholes usually, while there are sudden failures, we do know the history and the age of all, I want to say it's 200 and 50 miles or so of both sewer and storm drain pipe that's all around the city, that it would present itself as a depression level. You would see, similar to, I think, a water main if it's leaking, and if it starts eroding the subgrade and the soils, typically it'll be a little dip, and it's when you have a water main rupture or in a heavy storm, right, if there's a lot of volume of water in a storm drain pipe and it ruptures and really quickly erodes, that's when they drop. So I can say with confidence it's a highly unlikely event given the what's the word, high level of maintenance that BWP does on their water lines and that we do on our storm drain lines. Did you want to say anything, Mr. Ron? Okay. Thank you.
Any more comments, questions on the items on page 2? Whoa, we need another.
And that's follow up with the Starlight Bowl. I didn't want to interrupt your follow-up before, but, so with the Starlight Bowl, Mr. Vanderboort, I think too that is also being discussed in the community as, there's interest in using it more as a space for performance because we don't have a large performance space in the city otherwise. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here for, because there's so much interest in the arts community for that space, if there's an opportunity for partnership or for some sort of collaboration, but also with recognizing the impact on the community, right? So I think that's, and that particular project is probably going to be a longer phase, more in-depth conversation, but I just wanted to point out that there are folks in the community that are looking towards that space as being more of an opportunity, so just want to put that in there for your information too.
I'll take the liberty of saying folks who live down stream from the theater don't want to see more traffic. Those on Walnut, on Harvard, and the other streets, and we can endure a certain amount, but not a year-round operation. At least that's my opinion. All right, do we have more comments? I have a couple questions, if no one else. The McCambridge Park pool renovation says the pool has been given an estimated 5-year lifespan until renovation improvements are needed. Inasmuch as this was done 9 to 10 years ago, where are we? I mean, we're 5 years past the sunset. Do we have any idea?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did see that 5-year
Yeah.
notice too, and I said, oh, okay. Well, the good news is in real time right now, and for the past year, Public Works and Parks have been analyzing what improvements are needed, both to the pool and importantly, I'd say more importantly, to the equipment room. And I'm not exactly sure of a time frame, but that is something that we have a consultant on board, an aquatics expert, if you will, taking a look at that. And if there's a project to be coming out of that, it will be before you in February. And if not, we can provide an explanation of maybe the minor maintenance or small capital projects that are going to occur.
Okay, thank you. That just stood out. Also, Verdugo Aquatic Facility says the slide was installed in 2013 and it needs to be replaced. You know, a 9-year lifespan for this stuff, that seems, you know, short. That's just my thoughts on the matter. We don't have anyone from the park department here this evening, do we?
No, but we can bring it to their attention so they can chat about it when we meet with them.
Yeah, that project for the slide replacement was part of the 22-23 CIP that the board had approved and council approved. Yeah,
Was it?
for the slide.
Okay, okay. All right, now move on to page 3. Do we have any questions or projects that leap out that we want to recommend that they be given a higher priority? I know there is one that our future council member will probably bring up. Anyone want to speak? Go ahead.
Yeah, you know which one I'm going to be bringing up, which is the shade at Carson Park, at Johnny Carson Park. But I believe that structure is already in the pipeline through the art and public places funding, so I'm not sure if this is still reflective on the list.
So these two projects, the Maxon Park ball field fencing and the Carson Park stage shade structure, those are two projects that did not go above the line last year. So these are new projects that were added as part of the unfunded project list. So
Right. If I
think-
recall, Ms. Garcia said that the reason why she did not include it in the suggested funding was because it was going to be funded by the arts and public places. So I'm wondering if that's either just not yet been, started, but that's the intention, or if, I'm curious, it'd be curious to see where that's at.
Yeah, so we're expecting the 23-24 project sheets from all the departments tomorrow. So we'll see if that's included. If not, then we could talk to them about it. And when we're presenting all the projects to the board in February, they could explain why or why not that they included or not included it
Great.
in the list.
Thank you. I also wanted to point out that one of the projects on here is that, it's hold on a second. In the facilities section down at the bottom, the passport acceptance facility renovation. I just wanted to point out that the passport program in the clerk's office is a very successful program. And I have been in that building when the line has been all the way down into the main court area in the front, and people are waiting. And I think that any way that we can support that program, this is a good investment. So if there is a way to invest into it that will increase the throughput and ability for the passport office to process more, I think that would be beneficial for everybody. So those are my two things that I had for that list. Thank you.
Okay, well taken. I know when it was at the main post office, I don't know if it's still there, the lines were extremely long for people waiting.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vandenborg, if I may. I wanted to make sure we're capturing this, because I think at the end, we're going to want to have a decision. I think there were 3 projects now, including the one Board Member Takahashi just mentioned, the passport acceptance. I believe Mr. Vandenborg mentioned Starlight Bowl going from 2 to 3. Ms. Takahashi mentioned now passport going from 3 to something of a higher priority possibly, and I don't know if there was another one that anybody wanted to change priority, but at the end of this, please be sure to keep in mind things you would like your board members to consider changing for us, so we can bring that to staff.
Mr. Vandenberg.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to take advantage, as we're on page 2 specifically, to comment on something that I feel strongly about, and we've been through this before, but the Bell Golf Course improvements, $2.25 million. I know we've already spent hundreds of thousands from Measure P funds in the last couple of fiscal years, and I think we're currently spending money for that. All good money. This is not about any misuse of funds, but this is a reminder that one of the reasons that I had asked a year and a half ago or 2 years ago that we discuss what the responsibilities or efforts of this board should be, I'm trying to remind myself that we're here as watchdogs, right? Our task is to be an oversight board based on those Measure P funds, where we ask the public to cough up money out of their wallets. At this point, that money, by the way, is growing nicely. I watched from a distance your meeting last month, and the millions keep adding up. The city continues to only cough up $4 million, which in my opinion is another effort that is not the good faith effort that we sold to the public. That's just my opinion. So with the Bell Golf Course, I feel is important, and I know Parks and Rec has it as a 1. And I'm not for a moment suggesting that I know what it is they want to move forward with, although every year we come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars. The general fund is receiving money from the Bell Golf Course. So are we really doing what we told the folks when we all voted for Measure P, and that is not supplanting dollars that otherwise the general fund was going to spend? I don't know the answer, but I also think that that is what is at the core of our responsibility, and something in my heart feels like it's not right, that somewhere along the line, we're using funds that we shouldn't be using for projects that otherwise should be paid by the general fund. I know there's an enormous demand for a general fund. I mean, every penny is accounted for. Everybody scratches what they can to make the general fund dollars go as far as possible. But I believe that this is not what we voted for as members of the public, and that is we were told that these funds from Measure P would be for projects that otherwise never get done and that are over and above the dollars that the city would otherwise spend. So I get off my high horse, and I know we've been there. We sent a letter to the council. The council responded by saying, we're going to keep it at 4 million. Of course, one day we may spend more, but I just don't think that that's the right response to the general public at large. I think that's a bit of the problem we all have with tax dollars. You know, it's the money is fungible, and at the end of the day, we have no way of really controlling things, but I think this board does. This board at least has the opportunity to speak up, and that's what I'm doing as one of our members when we talk about the Bell specific numbers, because I think that there's general fund dollars that are coming in that should be considered for these kinds of expenditures, and that would be the correct concept of what we're asking the general public to do when we pay 0.75% more in sales tax than other communities, and let alone, you know, not only in our general area of the county, but certainly throughout the state and the nation. We have an incredible high tax. Thank you, sir.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. Yes.
Going along with Mr. Vanderboord, exactly how much money does the golf course make in terms of loss and profit? Do they make any money at all?
So I know our senior attorney would agree with me here. I do not know that, but for this board, that's outside the purview of the board as opposed to considering projects. That's something that the parks folks would have in their advice to council during the budget process and the general fund and revenues and expenditures. It's part of that overall, several overall reports that Finance Director Becker does during that time. So I'm sure that information is provided during that time. And if I may, Mr. Chair, to make sure we're clear on Board Member Vanderboort's comment, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. The thing that we, for the board, brought to council was the minimum Measure P expenditure being set at $4 million. The actual expenditure of Measure P within our capital programs for the past few years, I think, outside of COVID, I think it's been about 13 million of Measure P dollars. So that 4 million is the law, the proposition's law guideline of a minimum investment. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody.
But something like the golf course and maybe other issues where they actually generate funds or commercial funds and I presume give money back to the city, if they have a profit margin, that should be going back into improving their facilities without us getting involved with that. Because it should be a profit-making operation where we don't have to be involved with.
Chair Jackson.
Members of the board, just adding on to, Director Berkman's comments. We're taking in some comments and advice from you, and I think we could couch this within the discussion of these are the unfunded needs, and what I hear is a preference to use certain types of funds, if possible, in this discussion in funding these projects. And we could certainly include that as part of staff's takeaway from this discussion. But in terms of kind of getting too far into the specifics, I think that's probably outside the purview of this particular agenda topic. But I think staff does understand the concern and could add to that as they figure out internally how to prioritize and also how to fund these projects moving forward.
Mr.
Chair
Holland?
Jackson, yeah, if I may.
Yes.
So the project estimate, we haven't identified the funding source. So we're going to always seek other funds, or it doesn't, just because the dollar amount of 2.5 is here, doesn't mean it's Measure P funds either. So it's,
Totally clear.
so those are, I think, when we present the projects, those are the discussions we could have in more detail at that time.
And Board Member Brennan, I think the appropriate conversation to have at the end is, do we want to lower the priority in your case for consideration of Measure P funding these projects?
Yes, Mr. Tuck.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Mr. Vanderport, and the rest. I think that when we talked about the developed golf course improvements in the last round, one of the comments that we made was that one of the items was like this similar, it was, this is developed golf course improvements. It listed a lot of different improvements. And so in the second presentation that Ms. Garcia gave to us, she pulled out a number of the improvements separately or rearranged them. So I'm wondering if maybe in this particular item, rather than putting them all together in one bulk as a priority one, to pull out the ones from this list, because there's about 10 things on this list that really are high priorities for safety, for making sure that the quality of the golf course is maintained from a, appealing, it'll appeal people to come and play. What's the ROI on each of these things, rather than a bulk, here's $2 million, $2.25 million for all of this stuff. That way too, with the Parks and Rec, there's so much to cover that it allows the board as well, I think, to then kind of pick a little bit more granularity of which parts of the DeBell Golf Course we think are valuable to invest in this time around versus the other park investments. So I think would that be helpful, Mr. Vanderboord, if that were presented in as well as potentially considering the level of priority?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Takahashi, yeah, absolutely. That's why I prefaced by saying I didn't know what the components were for me to be able to say, I want to bring this down to a level 3. Both, the Vice Chair and I have an opinion about funding, but and it's very clear, this is not the discussion of funding, of course. We're not funding, $500 million worth of Measure P tomorrow. It's just simply a matter of observing. This is the opportunity to say, should we be, as a board, prioritizing this as a number 3 and let staff work their way back to us, as you suggest, with smaller bites that tell us why it needs to be paid. But,
Yeah.
And so maybe this is one that is simply, it requires more clarification from staff before we knock it down to a 3 and create a bit of a headache for staff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's exactly what I was going to say. We'll bring it to Parks' attention to take a look at these and make sure they revise them and make them applicable and thorough.
All right, that said, for the record, I agree with both you and Mr. Brennan. And I think those should be 3s and taken from other funding sources. And I believe it was $1 million in the black over the last fiscal year. All right, moving on, we're dealing with facilities, which is the bottom of page 3 and page 4 of our list. Do you have any comments or questions on those items?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification from staff's perspective, that $88 million number, again, has been a placeholder for a while about the library. Should that remain there in that fashion? Should it be increased? How should we be dealing with it in this unfunded, future projects or assets, whatever we want to call it? Just because I'm not sure that 88 million should be in this list anymore if we've already started down the path of funding all of this, that maybe this is no longer a demand of money. We already know we're funding it. We appear to have a means to do it that we're pursuing, so I know it's a long road. We may be years into this, but it's on its way.
Yeah, so Chair Jackson and Board Member Vanderboord, yeah, so we will be updating the sheets and projects that are moving forward that we will be deleting and removing from the list.
All right, no more comments or questions. My only comment would be on the kitchen at the police fire building. I'm sure it needs rehab, but I think other funding sources than Measure P are really what the voters expressed. So I would give it a lower rating than the 1. On page 5, which is streets, do we have any comments, questions on those items?
Yeah, interestingly, Mr. Hahn, I'm wondering why we have 2 streets categories.
Yeah, I wondered that
I
myself.
just realized that.
The first
Maybe there's a
section was
reason.
existing, the second one is new, is what.
So the list is broken into existing assets and new assets. So the double track, that would be considered a new asset. So that's how, yeah.
At the header, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yes.
So at the header, it says new assets as opposed to
Okay.
the other ones were existing assets.
Yes.
So, yeah, glad I asked.
Well, not hearing any of my colleagues, I'm just going to comment that 2 items leaped out to, in my eyes. The San Fernando Boulevard street ballards, which is a relatively small item at $300,000. And removable safety barriers, which seems, you're talking about the same item, that's much higher, 1.5. But I think those should be given, serious consideration if they haven't. I mean, I think we're taking safety measures already. So, this may be a moot issue that I'm bringing up.
Yes, thank you, sir. We are actively looking at downtown San Fernando Boulevard improvements. That was based on last capital year program that we developed, and council requested staff to take a look at 2 options. I think it's from Angelino, right? To is the whole? No, I think that's just Olive. From Olive to Magnolia, a one-way circulation and also a full closure. So staff and consultants are looking at that right now, and I believe we're looking to go to council to provide a report in, I think we're looking at February. So to the point of this sheet, these 2 projects, downtown San Fernando Boulevard street improvements and amenities, and San Fernando Boulevard downtown street bollards, I think we'll be looking to CDD transportation, and we'll make sure these are accurate or if they should be pulled.
I thought there was discussion going on and research. Any other questions on, yes, Ms. Tuck?
So although this isn't a change, I just wanted to, first of all, I'm pleased to see several projects specifically focusing on bike and pedestrian safety and access. I think that's huge. It's going to be a big part of our future street improvements, so I'm pleased to see that. And I'm really glad to see, and I want to put a lot of emphasis on the safety measures around the north side of the Burbank Bridge and that area on San Fernando, between San Fernando and Burbank. That intersection there is so dangerous for bicycles and also sometimes for pedestrians with the new bridge too as well. So I'm glad to see that that's on the list. So that's in North San Fernando Boulevard Streetscape and Safety Project. I'm assuming that's the part that's on. That's the part, it's above Burbank Bridge, right? Yeah. So that, I know it's been in the works, and I know that there's been quite a bit of drama around the new bridge and bike safety and pedestrian safety, and I'm pleased to see it's there, and I'm glad to see it's 1. If I could make it 1 in bold, I would. And then just in general, just the concept of keeping bikes and pedestrians, especially downtown, focused on the safety there. I'm just pleased to see that, and I wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Vandenberg?
Just an observation, there, rightfully so, there are a lot of ones here, and meaning, how does that saying goes, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, or maybe I have it reversed, when nothing is a priority, whatever it is. If there's so many ones, are we really getting ourselves to a point that we'll never be able to really focus on anything in particular? I don't, and this is for staff more than anything else, and I know that's Mr. Krisky's department to a large extent, but maybe we can just ask him to, maybe he can put 1.1, 1.2, 1.5, however he makes it easier for us to kind of grasp what it is he sees as a potential future for a number of these projects. For example, the only one that is at 3 is the one that, in my opinion, could be an altering effect to the city, and that is that this is a study how to cap that 134 freeway in the Media District area. I don't know if you've ever looked at the basic, just sketches that were created. And this is a phenomenal idea of creating a park facility over the freeway, and it's fantastic. I know it's a dream, so maybe that's why it's a 3, and therefore it's okay, but hopefully somebody continues to dream, because eventually dreams become reality. But so many ones make me wonder, ooh, you know, what is really the priority? Just a general observation.
Follow up on that. If you look at the existing assets, most of those are 2s and 3s. So I'm wondering, I don't know if David Christie's not here to answer to this, but maybe there's going to be more of a focus on the new assets and less on the existing. I don't know, but that's something to consider too, is that these other assets are 2s and 3s. So I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Berkman?
Yeah, so we need to remember that this, again, is a high-level review. So we're not scoring on 1 to 10. We're not scoring them out of, what's our score, 50? You know, it's not a prioritization score. This is something that allows staff to see what the IOB believes are categories of high and medium and low. And it's up to staff to go through each one of these and bring the most important ones at a critical time forward into consideration for Measure P funding in the capital program each and every year. So while I totally understand when you see everything being top priority, how could we possibly do it? That's true. It's up to us as staff to say, this really is the top of the ones, so please, let's consider this for scoring and for council's consideration going forward.
Armin?
Oh, yeah. Okay, just a real quick question here for you, Mr. Bergman. In looking at previous Central Library, 88 million, that's a 1, and then the Central Plaza, which is 60 million, shouldn't those two be together? Seriously, because they're right next door to each other, or right into each other in terms of location. Shouldn't those two projects be one and the same? Or
Where is the Central Plaza? I'm missing it.
Civic Plaza, bottom of page
Civic
5.
Plaza is $60 million and
Oh.
proposed, and the Central Library proposed.
Yes,
Don't they kind of work hand in hand?
yes,
Shouldn't
absolutely.
they be together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Instead of separate. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
thank you.
Armin? That was your? Yeah, that's true.
Kind of like,
Okay.
focus there.
Any more comments or questions? I mean, we have to look back. This is what, you say 2013? And so a lot of these ideas have been addressed in parts, if not in whole. Okay, we're to the last page, which is parks and facilities yet unfunded. Does anyone have any questions or comments on these items?
Sorry, it's already on. Mr. Chair, board members, I can address in parks, 1, 2, 3, 4 down security cameras. One of the things, a new effort this past year that staff is doing citywide with departments is we are looking at a video and physical security policy. So we are having a policy developed to make sure experts look at all of our facilities and kind of give us guidelines on what we should be doing. So in all likelihood, this, we would talk to Ms. Garcia and her team about this, along with probably PD and IT and our facilities folks, to say, what do we want to have here, if anything, at this time? But there's definitely a study going on to make sure we have a report of what we should be doing to enhance security properly citywide at our facilities.
Ms. Takuchi?
Thank you for bringing that up. I was wondering about that, and I'm glad it's on the list. So I actually have a question about the top item, which is the Service Club Welcome Monument fixture. And I'm hoping folks who've been in the city for a while might be able to speak to this too, because I remember hearing maybe a year or two ago, Mr. Talamontes on council talking about wanting to have a monument like this, or wanting to put, when we built the Burbank Bridge, to put a Burbank across the bridge or something, and we don't have that in the city. And I'm just curious why most cities do have some sort of like welcome, big Burbank like Glendale has one when you go into Glendale, there's the Glendale thing. I'm just curious about that, but thoughts about that from having been around for a while? Or maybe there is one, I just don't know where it is because I haven't seen it. But I don't remember seeing like a welcome to Burbank service sign or like anything like that coming into our city.
All right, Board Member Takahashi, the project, the consideration of a project itself, the latest that I've heard was to have not necessarily service clubs signs, but an actual, like you said, a welcome to Burbank type of sign. And I
Yeah.
believe it was considered, the location to be considered was the off-ramp of the 134 on Alameda by Whole Foods, is it? By the
Oh.
Tularia? Am I saying that
okay.
right?
In the media district?
Did I get that name right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little new.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's
Yeah.
one location, but we haven't, obviously, with a prioritization of 3, we haven't pursued it in depth. So we'll take a look at it and talk about it with, that's probably something we would talk about with the city manager department, I think. Office.
It seems like a small project that would have kind of a high impact of a community, pride and recognition, and especially in the media district, making that transition from North Hollywood or the other areas of town into Burbank. I think that's kind of it's kind of exciting to say this is our city, and we haven't had it.
Yeah.
So have we had one before, Mr. Van Bert, that you're aware of? Or?
I'm going to just remember that we had them from the media district. The problem with these signs is they become old after a while, and they become dated, and unless you really are Reno, the biggest little city in the world, Burbank putting a, welcome to the media center or welcome to Burbank, you have to really be good at doing something that will last for 20 years, 50 years, as opposed to after a few years, the wood starts looking decrepit and it's falling apart. But I know has been, I remember when we were in the planning board, perhaps, Mr. Jackson, remember there were some signs that were proposed, or when it's come and gone, and at the end of the day, that's the challenge with these things, is unless you really hit the mark and, get a home run, you're gonna end up with something that will end up needing maintenance, kind of like that airplane on
Yeah.
on Olive Park.
And if I may, have a moment of candor, and this is the right board to do it with, these types of projects take up an inordinate amount of staff time, because obviously Burbank is a community that takes a lot of pride in living and working and having fun here. And the ideas of what a monument sign should look like, it makes my head hurt a little bit.
We'd need a whole
But
commission just for that.
we can do it if that's a priority.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. Brennan?
Real quick, got unfunded, but or sort of priority 2, new soccer fields, which would be a great idea. Where do you plan to build them, considering that it's a very popular sport amongst young folks anyway, as well as internationally? And I would like to see that happen, but where do you plan on building them? Seriously? No idea, okay.
Mr. Chairman, you probably can answer that question, because that's also been around for the longest time, the proposal of doing the soccer fields. We ended up years later doing the joint use with the school district so that we can use their renovated fields in Burroughs and Burbank High. But yeah, we never are willing to really bite the bullet and buy land, like we were talking about buying it at the airport. I remember our Councilman Campbell back then was adamant that we shouldn't do that because of health issues with the airport, pollution, et cetera. There was something about doing where the Home Depot is now, and that went down the drain because of the pollution from the freeway. At the end of the day, we did nothing, and here we are. It's very difficult to find land now that fits a reasonable criteria. But I think that's probably been a place marker since I became involved in public service 35 years ago.
Okay.
More questions?
answers the question.
More questions or comments? Well, yes, please, Ms. Coronado.
We could always build a soccer field over a bridge, like we're, right? Just a thought.
Well, we laugh about capping the freeway. They did in Boston. Took a gazillion years and a gazillion dollars, but, it's beautiful. 2 items jumped out, the security cameras, which you already addressed, Mr. Beckman, and the animal shelter, Mr. I like to speak up for the dogs at this kennel. I mean, if $20,000 can be found to, was that 20? Yeah, 20, for the summer months, I think that, would be well spent.
You
All
didn't
right.
mention the pond, though. The pond is also a really, I think that's a really cool idea. I don't know. These kinds of innovative ideas are, if there's a way to get them, especially if the community partners and helps out. We just, at the animal shelter, they just did the mural against the wall, which was pretty cool. So these are kind of innovative ideas that maybe our body may not fund completely, but to have them on the list gives people ideas to potentially partner. So this is cool. I think that's great.
And if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we should remember that Parks just took over the animal shelter from the police department last year. And there are 2 projects, I think, that were moved forward. One is to do the kennel flooring, and I think they're pursuing a shade structure, right? So those 2 are ongoing now, and I've made a note to tell Parks folks the Mr. system is something that the board would like.
Assuming it's needed at this point, I mean,
Sure.
they may already have done something. Okay, so what are we going to do? We've gone through the list of unfunded needs. We've made, I think, some constructive, yes, Mr. Gugger.
a few things that were not on the list, that was just one.
Oh, by all means.
There's 3 items that were not on the list that maybe I'm misremembering that they were funded from last time, but I don't recall that they were. First one is the Olive Verdugo Sparks intersection. I thought it was on the unfunded list last time. It didn't get funded yet, and then it was pushed forward, but correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
That is an active project. And,
okay.
Transportation, Mr. Kreisky's group is looking at that now. We can have a little status update. I think we have a project sheet for it, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it on my notes then to bring it to the potentially future agenda item. Another one was the dog park, the Dick Clark Dog Park that's just by the freeway. Is that?
It's an active project.
Oh, it's an active project
Yes.
now, okay. And then the last one is, we've been talking about the San Fernando Road reorganization between Magnolia and Orange Grove, I think it was, or something. Is that something that would be under our list to fund, or, you know what I'm talking about, right? The changing it maybe to a one-way, or?
That's what I was mentioning, yes, between Olive and Magnolia.
Yeah,
We will revise the San Fernando Boulevard unmet needs projects to make sure they're accurate, because it is
Oh,
an
okay.
active study that you as a council member will be seeing in the coming months. That's the one-way, and council, in my budget presentation, they requested a consideration for our staff and consultants to look at a full closure also. So those 2
Okay.
options are something we'll be bringing to council.
great, okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As I was saying, we've discussed the items. Do you have enough direction from us, or do you want us to?
Please, Mr. Chair and board members, I think it would be worth going through the list just once more to the most specific thing we need, because we took notes on which projects we want to go to the departments, make sure they are accurate, if they should be removed, like the best example is the library and the civic center. Costs accurately updated, but for this group, if there are any priorities to change, we definitely would like to hear those and have consensus, because there are several individual ideas, so we need board consensus on if there's any action to take to modify this list project prioritizations.
Okay, yes, Mr. Vandenberg.
I'll make a motion that we change the number 2 to a 3 priority on the Starlight Bowl. See if there's a second.
We have a second. All in favor of that? Aye. Opposed? Okay, 2 opposed. And
If we are,
I don't know
I'm sorry, if we are going to do that, we should do roll calls for those, if we're going to do that. Or, would you, I'm looking at the city attorney, should we
Yeah,
go through and
I was just about to step.
do a
I mean,
whole swath?
Yeah, I
right?
think because we described this as giving input to staff, I don't think we have to go through the formality of a formal motion for each item you want to upgrade or decrease in priority. I think as long as there is a sense from staff that they understand what the consensus of the board is, I think that's fine. That satisfies, how we have it listed on the agenda.
I have a suggestion.
Yes,
Before we
please.
change, before we change any of the prioritization categories, can we ask staff to bring us their analysis of how did they come up with this scoring?
You all came up with the scoring. We did this together. We, go ahead,
Yeah.
Mr. Hahn.
So the scoring, the staff, the department heads, they came up with the priority numbers.
But we brought it
Yeah, we brought
before
it, yeah.
to get your recommendations as well.
Yes.
So that's what's presented now.
Correct.
I think I would like to go through and just make sure, I would just say, I understand this, and if folks say no, I don't want to come back and have the wrong information for them.
Yeah.
So I'll briefly go one page by one page. To Mr. Vanderbort's point, page 2, the DeBell Clubhouse expansion and DeBell Golf Course improvements, it's a 2 and a 1. I believe, I understand, we would like to make them a 2 and a 2. If I hear no objections.
Seems like a good compromise to let staff work its way forward with what they feel is important, but letting them know that there's a concern that we didn't vote for it to remain a 1.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And-
and excuse me, just to keep track of it for staff, if there, I think, I'm assuming silence is agreement, but, any raising of hands or any interjection would be like, we
Yeah.
need to discuss some more and have a consensus.
Please let us know, right? Thank you. Page 3,
I'm sorry,
sir.
Mr. Berkman, page 2, the storm drain pipe, we wanted to move it to a 1, correct, Vice Chair? And
If I may,
I know you explained
when we talked
funding.
from a staff perspective, it's a medium priority because it's always something that we are considering as our field crews, and every rainy season, if we see issues, typically issues are reported by the public to us. I was traveling, this is flooded, in front of my home, this is flooded. So we get those reports in addition to our team's observations. It does not mean that the public health and safety consideration is not 100% top priority. It's just that the condition of our storm drain system, it's something that we want to make sure the public knows is a need, and there is no real grant funding or other sources of funding for storm drains. It's general fund or it's Measure P. That Measure W that we as voters put in through the county is for really stormwater quality projects. So we'll follow the board's direction, but I would recommend from staff's perspective that we keep it at a 2 because our system is in good shape and we have individual projects that would come up that we may need this type of funding for that we would bring to you to do.
Maybe next year.
Sure, thank you.
I mean, like the year after this.
It's a living document, and we can always change it as we go forward through the process. I appreciate that.
Just for clarification, at least for me, as we're going on, I mean, this list, the departments do look at it when you're going into the budget season and decide, yes, we may plunk this item out and give it priorities in one of the 17 items for funding, or is this just something that's been in existence and like an appendix? We have it, but, we may not really need it to.
Mr. Chair, I would say it has been kind of sitting there since Measure P was created, but we properly took a priority to take a look at it. And every year since Mr. Hahn has been here, just before me, we've made sure it is part of each department staff to look at this really before you say, I want to do this new thing, or I have this existing asset I have to take care of. Well, we have this. So make sure you look at these and carefully consider, and that's why it's so beneficial for us to hear from you, so we can tell them, of this list, these are your highest priorities that the board really wants you to look at, And from my perspective, when you attend this meeting in February, March, just be ready to explain what's going on and why maybe this isn't going forward, whatever this is for the board, compared to what you're proposing. Did I get that right?
Yes, so we did distribute the list to all the departments, so they have it as they're putting their CIP budget together.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping was going to be your answer, and that we weren't just spinning our wheels. Do we have some items on page 2 or 3 that, I know on 3, the park structure, really like to give that a high priority. It's 1 now. but we'd
Which
like
one,
to-
sir? I'm sorry.
On page 3, the Carson Park stage shade structure.
Yes, and I believe Mr. Hahn said both Maxim and Carson Park, the shade, the ballpark fencing and the shade structures are something that didn't make it last year. So perhaps Parks will submit it again, and we'll make sure they understand that the board considers these high
Yeah.
priorities.
Right, I think that's, okay.
Mr. Chairman, did we decide that we have a majority consensus? I'm not pushing here too hard, but if we have a 4 vote to move Starlight Bowl down to a 3 from a 2.
I'll second that.
We're not, per the city attorney, taking votes on anything.
No, but
Well,
it's
it's
just
just-
an
But,
assent
how many
or
think that's a
consent.
great idea?
So I would just say, I understand there's a desire for the Starlight Bowl to be ranked a 3. So staff is going to make that a 3 unless I hear any objections.
The only one that really counts here, we'll have a vote.
We have an objection there.
After the 19th
Her-
doesn't agree with us.
Or
Carries
discussion,
more
or
weight than
discussion,
ours.
right? From 2 to 3, it's the second item from the top on page 3.
Wait,
Sorry, go ahead.
quick question. Ms. Takahashi, didn't you feel strongly about this Starlight Bowl? And didn't we just discuss this and you had a strong feeling about how important it was to our community and arts and community? And I think we just discussed that and now we're changing that. Are you sure you want to?
Well, as a board, we are, if we get 4 votes. If
Right.
we don't, go for the 2.
Right, I just wanted to put into consideration that, I mean, what, I'm assuming is when it's a 1 to 3, 3 is the lowest priority, right? So it's last. And that there are folks in the community that do see Starlight Bowl as a potential opportunity for improving access and having access to larger scale performances that are available to the community to put on. So, I mean, from an infrastructure funding perspective, it's could be a 3, but from a community interest perspective, I think it is more of a 2, maybe even a 1.5. So from our perspective of looking at how much of the city's infrastructure money we'd like to put into improving it just per se without consideration of perhaps like what the demand is, just, oh, it needs improvement, put more money in, okay, I could see a 3. But looking ahead for how the community might be interested, that I want to still have it, well, I guess if it's a 3 but stays on the list solid, that it's there, so when the community does start to look into it and wanting to work together with parks, that it is on the list at least, so maybe by the time things get going, then next year, maybe I'll move up to a 2, so I've talked myself into being okay with the 3,
Oh, nice.
for now.
Okay. Thank you. At the bottom of that page, the passport facility, I think we wanted to bump that up from a 3 to something. I just didn't know. So we could bump that up to a 2 without objections? Okay, thank you. Nothing on page 4. And we had some rewriting and revisions on page 5, but nothing about priorities, and nothing on priorities on 6 either. So I think we have direction from staff, unless you have any questions, Mr. Hahn?
Mr. Berkman?
Yes.
The kennel, the sprayer, mister for the dogs, if that's not already in the plan.
Yes, I noted it's definitely a 1, and that the board would
Okay.
like Parks to strongly consider moving that forward.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. Okay, have we exhausted our comments
I
on
think
that?
we're done.
I think we have. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, moving on to item H, introduction of additional agenda items. Do we have any? All right, Mr. Takaguchi.
I wanted to revisit the previous comment or the previous discussion earlier about the update on Olive Sparks Verdugo, just to officially request that be presented again. It's been a while since we've had an update, and I think it'd be good for the board to see what's going on there, especially considering the previous public comment about the BRT. That may be a good time to talk about it too at the BRT presentation with David Kriske here, because it is going to be probably coinciding, I'm imagining, with the BRT, because it's in the same path, right?
Right. Through the chair, Board Member Takahashi, it's a good project to talk about. The thing that is not on our pending agenda items, like the tax man or woman would say, we're entering our busy season, so come February and March, we are going to have our busy months, and Olive Sparks Verdugo project will be in that capital program. We'll be sure to highlight it and maybe have some more discussion about it here.
Anyone else have additional items? I don't know if it's an additional item, but we some time ago decided to try to be in communication with the traffic committee, and we created a list of liaisons. I felt guilty about the fact that I missed the October meeting, and I don't like feeling guilty. So are we going to do this next year? If so, then the roster needs to be updated. So maybe we should discuss in January if we want to continue our liaison or non-liaison with the traffic committee.
And Mr. Chair, it's a good point. With Ms. Takahashi's departure to council, council will be selecting a new member for this board, so maybe that's an appropriate time to take a look at that list again.
Arrive on the scene? Okay.
Pick a good one for us.
Okay. All right, we have pending items in January, a cooperative agreement, whatever COOP is. Co-op, okay. And then first and second quarter CIP program reports. And then there's things out in the future, which I don't think, well, when we get to them. Other than that, does anyone want to make any further comments? All right, well, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and our next meeting will be on January 26, 2023, not 2022, as is on the...
Oh, we
Yes.
almost made it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening and best wishes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.